Okay, so we're moving on to siman lamitet. Siman lamitet, at least the first part, discusses who can write tefillin and who can make the tefillin. Okay, we had a little bit of this back when we learned Hilchot Sefer Torah, this sugya. Okay, so some of it might recall. So Gemara in Masechet Gitin. This is actually the context here in the Gemara is the Mishnah says, "Ein lokhin sfarim tefillin umezuzot min avdei kochavim yoter al chdei mehen mipnei tikun haolam." In the Mishnah, this has to do with a whole series of halachot of tikun haolam. Like for example, we know the famous halacha by Pinyon Shvuyim, not to redeem them at more b'chdei mehen. So by the same token, we don't buy sfarim tefillin umezuzot from goyim yoter al chdei mehen if it's for much more than their value. Because we don't want to sort of encourage them. They'll see, oh, this is a profitable business, that we can steal a Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzot from Jews, and then sell them back. So you only buy them at their value. The Gemara says you can buy it a little bit more than the value, but not exceedingly more than the value. So out of this, the Gemara gets into the whole issue of who is kosher to write the Sifrei Torah, and it brings a braita which is as follows. Sefer Torah tefillin umezuzot shektavan, here depending on the gear, siman or rakikos, or masur. Masur is a moiser. We will see why that's a problem. Oved kochavim, agoy, eved, isha vekatan, vikuti, b'Yisrael mumhar, sulin. All of these are possible to write. Sifrei Torah tefillin umezuzot, שנאמר וכשרתם וכתבתם. כל שישנו בקשירה, ישנו בכתיבה, וכל שאינו בקשירה אינו בכתיבה. In other words, only somebody who is in the mitzvah of tying tefillin can write tefillin, and therefore that excludes obviously a goy and an eved, kuti, which is like a goy, a mumar, which is also considered to be like a goy, but also a katan, because he's not yet chad mitzvot, and even a woman, since she's not mitzuveh on tefillin, on wearing tefillin, she's also cannot write tefillin, and the Gemara learns out that the chtavtam applies not just tefillin, but also to mezuzah and to the Sefer Torah. So a woman cannot write any of those since she's not in the mitzvah of tefillin. Okay, this raises a machloket here Rishonim. I won't get into it now. I'll just mention it briefly. What happens regarding other mitzvot that the woman is not mitzvah on? So Tosfot here brings, "Mikan omer Rabbeinu Tam de'ini sha'o gedet lulav o satzitzi, kivan de lo mifkeda." So Rabbeinu Tam learns out your principle that any mitzvah a woman is not chayav in, she cannot make the item of that mitzvah, so she cannot tie the arba minim together, the lulav, she cannot make tzitzit. Okay, and Tosfot here argues with him. He says, "Ve'in yireh dam demipaslin and berish atchelet tzitzit v'oved kochavim, derish b'nei Yisrael v'asu v'lo b'ovdei kochavim miklal disha kshera." In other words, so he proves that tzitzit, only a goy is possible to make tzitzit, but not a woman. V'amrina nami sukat gnavach kshera b'perek Kama desuka, right? Well, that's also, I don't know if that's so much of a proof, but anyway, Tosfot says that a ganvach, so goyim, nashim, in other words, even a sukkah made by a woman is kosher. Bottom line, though, Tosfot says, again, but there by sukkah, we're actually lenient that even a sukkah made by a goy is kosher. By sukkah, all of it requires that it's made for shade. Okay, but anyway, Tosfot says, Dafka b'sefrei Torah tefillin mizot, dichtivu kshartam uchtavtam darshin anav. In other words, according to Tosfot, argues with Rabbeinu Tam, says this is a special halacha in the Ktiva of Stam, where we require that a woman is mitzvah. But other items of mitzvot, even if the woman is not mitzvah in that mitzvah, she can still make that item. Okay. So that's the halacha here. In the Shulchan Aruch, there are a few details that are discussed regarding some of the specifics. Okay. So the Mechaber says in Seif Aleph, תפילין שכתבן עבד או אישה או קטן, אפילו הגיע לחינוך, in other words, even it's a katan that he's הגיע לחינוך, so midurabanan, he's chayiv b'tefillin. Okay, although nowadays we don't really do that so much. The katan only puts on tefillin very close to the bar mitzvah. But Mi'ikar Adin, we know a katan, once he reaches the age that he, can do mishomer his body, he's required to put on tefillin. I think maybe the Teimanim still do that nowadays. Most people, they put it on either at the bar mitzvah or a month or two before. But anyway, it doesn't matter, because even though he's chayiv midin chinuch, it's only midorabanan, not midoraita. Okuti, which have the status of like goyim, או מומר לעבודת כוכבים, או מוסר לאנסים, right? Somebody who's moser to the Jews, to non-Jews, he's also considered like a kofar, like a goy. משום דכתיב, וקשרתם וכתבתם, כל שאינו בקשירה, או אינו מאמין בה, אינו בכתיבה. Here, this lashon of the Mechaber, כל שאינו בקשירה, אינו מאמין בה, אינו בכתיבה, is actually taken from the Rambam. Let's see the lashon of the Rambam. It's very interesting. The Rambam says, ספר תורת תפילין ומזות שכתבן אפיקורס ישרפו, כתבן קוקטי או ישראל מומר או מוסר ביד אנס או עבד או אישה או קטן הרי פסולין ויגנזו, שנאמר וקשרתם וכתבתם, כל שמוזהר על הקשירה ומאמין בה הוא שכותב. In other words, according to the Rambam, it's not enough to be chayav in putting on tefillin, but you also have to believe in it, and that sort of excludes the mumar. Okay, in other words, when you write content of the Sifrei Torah Tefillin Mizuzot, you have to believe in what you're writing. Okay, and that's what gives it the kedusha of the Sefer Torah. Otherwise, it doesn't have that kedusha. Okay, if you write with a lack of belief.
Like, what would be the gvul about believing? Like, if some would say Torah Shebechsaf is from Hashem, whatever, but Torah Peh is not divine. Something would this already be because what he's writing in the moment is Torah Shebechsaf.
Right. I think the Mishnah Berurah discusses that. Let's just see in a moment. It's interesting. We received a question recently at Orach Chaim from somebody who had claimed that there was a concern with some of these old European Sifrei Torah that it was written by Reform Sofrim. Okay. In the end, we said there was no real, no way to substantiate the claim.
Really?
What?
I mean, nowadays they don't really exist, do they?
No. No, he wasn't talking about nowadays. He was talking about old Sifrei Torah in Europe before the wars, I think. I don't know what he was saying in Slonim. I don't know. He had all kinds of things, but we sort of looked into it, but there was no way to substantiate the claim. And we wrote for various reasons that if you find Sifrei Torah, you don't need to be cautious that it was written by somebody like that. I think the Mishnah Berurah addresses the question of what you just asked about somebody who doesn't believe. I saw it somewhere. Okay, I'm just I remember seeing it. I just don't remember where. Let's go through the Mishnah Berurah and hopefully we'll find it. If not, I'll locate it afterwards. Okay. Just saw it a few minutes ago. All right, I'll try to find it. Yeah, here he gets into the there's a Be'er Halacha here that he gets into it on okay, we'll get to it. Okay, I don't want to jump the gun, but he gets into a Be'er Halacha here on Tzdukim, Baitosim, Karaim, on I think he writes, yeah, because Yehudi sheino ma'amin li divrei razeh rabbeinu zal. He writes for sure you need to put it in Gniza. In other words, he says on the one hand it's definitely not kasher because it's if he doesn't care for the words of Chazal, then he wasn't makpid on halacha. All the different halachot that needs to go into the writing. But on the other hand, he says that to say that he's not writing lishma, and therefore it would be like an apikoros that you burn it, he says that's not true. So he says he is doing lishma, so therefore he says to put it in Gniza. But he says if somebody was watching over them and saw that they did it properly, okay, אם אחרים עומדים על גם דברים שלא היה בחסרון דחק תחות שמצויים לחגיגה, וגם שנכתב בשמה אין לפוסלו, דהווה עדיין בכלל בר קשירה. ולף לדחות, הלא ידעו אם שב יגתר ואך ביסור לאף בדרך כלל הביטוי בכלל ביקורס, ואנשים כאלה בזמננו ידוע שאינם חושבים כלל למצוות ומצאו אצלם קיבוץ שברך בפרהסיה, אם כן דינם כמו משיק אסף שם לעניין קראים, על כן יותר טוב שימחכם ויכתוב אחרים תחתיהם, אך אם לא יכול למחכה מחמד כסדרן או בתיות השם צריך עיון למעשה. So he sort of remains בצורת עיון on some of these situations, because it could be that it's possible. Okay. All right, let's go back to here. So again, the Mechaber says, תפילין שכתבן עבד או אישה או קטן אפילו הגיע לחינוך או קרותי, או מומר לעבודת כוכבים או מוסר לאנסים, פסולים משום דכתיב וכשרתם וכתבתם, כל שאינו בקשירה או אינו מאמין בה אינו בכתיבה. Okay, so a few details here. So here by Katan, the Mishnah Berurah says, he says, וכן לפי נקרא באינן שיהיה דווקא גדול ממש, דהיינו שהביא בית שערות אחר שהוא י"ג שנה. אבל אם ספק לנו, אם הביא בית שערות, פסול לכתוב, אם לא שנתמנה זקנו, דהיינו שיש ריבוי בשיער בזקנו, אף שהם קטנים מאוד. או שעברו רוב שנותיו, או שנדעו בסימני סריס. In other words, the basic principle here, we know that by a lot of areas of halacha, once a child reaches the age of 13, we treat him as a gadol. But really, mi'ikar adin, he only becomes a gadol once he has 2 pubic hairs that grow after he's the age of 13. So therefore, by most issues which are not doraita, like for a minyan and those kind of things, we rely on the chazaka de Rava, which means that he's becheskat. Once he's reached 13 years of age, he has a chazaka that he's also grown 2 hairs, and therefore we treat him as a gadol. However, by doraita issues, like here, where the doraita, if the katan does it, it's no good. So here we can't rely on that, but we actually have to verify that he's a gadol. So how do we verify that he's a gadol? So the most direct way is to check that he has hairs that have grown. But since usually people don't do that, then the other options are either, that he's definitely grow up and you can tell that he's of age, he has a full beard, or, those are the indications, that he's definitely a gadol. There's a long abrichut here in the Be'er Halacha on this. It seems that, I don't know how much this is common nowadays, but it seems that in the past, it was common for like sofrim to take on apprentice, like teenagers as how do you call it, apprentices? Is the right word?
Apprentices, that's right.
Apprentices, okay. To write with them and make with them tefillin, etc. So they had these issues. Nowadays, I don't know how much that's so common anymore. But it seems like it was a big issue in those times. Another interesting discussion here in the Mishnah Berurah and the Be'er Halacha is regarding a mumar. Okay, what makes somebody a mumar? Well, obviously, the classical mumar is that he's turned to another religion. Okay. However, we find in halacha other forms of mumarim as well. So mumar lechalel Shabbat b'farhesia. Okay, that's an obvious one, that he's also considered like an over the Avodah Zarah. Regarding a mumar for other averot, in other words, that it's not that he's not observant at all, but there's a specific averot that he constantly does. So he says mi'ikar adin, it will only disqualify him if he does it lehachis. Right? Lehachis means that, let's say he's a mumar to eat non-kosher lehachis. Lehachis means that even if he'll have your kosher food, it won't cost him anything, he still won't eat it, he'll dafka take something not kosher. That's somebody lehachis. However, if he's a mumar, yeah, I'm sorry?
Like bedafka.
Yeah, lehachis, he's doing, yeah, exactly, he's doing bedafka. There's a famous, reminds me, there's a joke that says that somebody heard that there was this great kofar somewhere, that everybody said he's the greatest kofar of them all. So he said he wanted to go and meet him. He was like on his way in becoming a kofar. So he wanted to meet this tremendous kofar everybody was speaking about. So he went to him and he saw that he was eating kosher and doing this and doing that and doing everything. So he said to him, "Why are you doing all this? Everybody told me you're the greatest kofar there is." He says, "That's true. Because it doesn't matter. That's why I'm doing it. In other words, somebody who's doing bedafka, it shows dafka that there might be a little bit of some belief in him, that he's seeing some significance. Like Brisker Rav, he said on the Satmar that would fast and read Vayechal on Yom Ha'atzmaut, he says, you are Tzionim. Asked him why. He says, because you admit that something happened on that day. Anyway. But anyway, that's Mumar Lehachis, in other words, that he's considered a Mumar. Mumar Lete'avon, in other words, that he's just doing it, he's buying non-kosher because he has a taiva for it, it's cheaper, or whatever. Then Mikar, then he would be kosher. He says here in the Mishnah Bura, the Chatchila better not to, but Mikar then it would be kosher if he wrote Tefillin. Again, it's only a Mumar. It's not somebody who just does a Veirot, he's a Rasha, doesn't hassle him from writing Tefillin, Zuzut, etc. Okay, Sif Bet, something very interesting. Here the Shulchan Aruch says, Kol she'pasul lekotvan, pasul bechol tikun asiyatan. In other words, anybody who's pasul from writing the Tefillin is also pasul in all the making of the Tefillin. Okay? Now, the question, what precisely does this include? We actually had a very interesting shaila on this, which I think is also a tshuva that's going to be published, or maybe it was already published, I don't remember. But I don't know if you've encountered it, but there was somebody who made a whole project teaching young children how to make tefillin, like a bar mitzvah project. He came up with a way to make tefillin not from all behemadasa, but from tefillin from all behemadaka, which is easier to work with. And he came up with a whole project, that kids would make their own tefillin. It was like very educational. The question is how to do it that the tefillin would be kosher. So there in that tshuva, we got into all the details of this. Okay. Basically, the makor for this is the Rambam. The Rambam writes as follows. He says, Ein osin tefillin ela Yisrael, שעשייתן ככתיבתן, מפני שהשין שעושים באור, כמו שאמרנו. לפיכך אם חיפה נקותי או תפרן פסולות, והוא הדין לכל הפסול לכותבן שלא יעשה אותה. Okay, so the Rambam says that making the tefillin is like writing the tefillin. Why? Because we make the shin in the or of the bite of the tefillin. Okay, in the tefillin shel rosh, right? We have to shape, as we know, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that we have to make a shape of the letter shin in the bite of the tefillin, in the leather. Okay. So that means that making the tefillin is like writing. Okay, now the Beit Yosef here asks a very simple question. So, lechora, the shin, okay, the shin is a letter, and that's ktiva. So that you would have to have a Jew do. But why do you need everything else, right? The Rambam says here, kipanakuti or faran psulo. Okay, in other words, so he says the entire asiya is like the ktiva. Okay. So what's the answer to that? So the Achronim here explain. I saw the one who I really enjoyed wrote it, I think, very clearly in my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Benovich, in his commentary on the Rambam Yad Pshutam. He says that the fact that we put the shin, because again, the shin in the tefillin is also only in the tefillin shel rosh, not in the tefillin shel yad. Okay, but he says the fact that we have a writing in the bite of the tefillin, that tells us that the bite of the tefillin is part of the kedusha tefillin itself. It's not the shemisha kedusha, like the straps are considered the shemishi. But the fact, you could have thought that only the klaf inside is the kedusha. But from the fact that we have the letter shin in the tefillin itself, that tells us that also the batim of the tefillin, they're also part of the etzem kedusha tefillin itself. Okay, and that's why it has to be done by a Jew. In other words, it's not just the shin itself, but the shin is indicative of what the batim of the tefillin are. So that's why the entire making of the batim of the tefillin has to be done by somebody who's qualified to write. Okay, so here the Mishnah Bura says. So what does this include? He says, "V'davka she'oseh maaseh beguf hatefillin, כגון חיפוי הבתים ותפירתן, וכל שכן עשיית באור הבתים, או להגיע איזה אור דעתו הוא פסול, ועל ידי הגעתו יוכשר, וזהו כתיבה ממש." So anything in the writing of the klaf, obviously, or the making of the bite of the tefillin, that's what you need these for. אבל עיבוד הקלף אינו בכלל זה, וכשר על ידי עובד כוכבים, וכל שכן על ידי אישה, רק בעובד כוכבים בעניין שיהיה ישראל עומד על גביו ויראה שיהיה לשמה. Okay, he says anything which is pre that, like the tanning of the leather to make it into a cloth, that's not included in this. However, it still needs to be done lishma. But lishma you can solve by having what we call Yisrael omed al gadav. Okay, that's a machloket, but that's the way we're lenient on that. And a woman can obviously do lishma. She's only excluded from the writing because she's not the mitzvah of tefillin, but she is able to do lishma. Okay, now he says here, ashcharat habatim. In other words, making the batim and the retzuot black. So there it's very interesting. There he paskins as follows. Making the batim black is only a mitzvah lechatchila. It's not me'akiv. So he says that you can even have a goy do. The retzuot, again, that is halacha leMoshe miSinai. So there he says that has to be done lishma. Again, it's not because kol she'ino b'kshira ino b'ktiva. That's okay. That only applies to the bottom of the tefillin itself, not to the ritzut, but it has to be done lishma. So if it has to be done lishma, again, a woman could do it, but a goy could not do it unless there was what we call gadol omed al gadav, somebody instructing him and showing him adding the kavanah lishma. What he is lenient about, though, here is, and he gets into more details here, and the Orach on this is gezerat devek sheben ot leot. In other words, if you're not writing the letters, but you're just fixing them up, like, for example, one is touching the other, that's not a problem in the writing, it's just a problem that it's not mukaf bil. So that he says, even though lechatchila you should do it by a Jew, b'diavad, if you did it with a woman or something like that, then b'diavad it would be kosher. And there are other discussions here on all kinds of other things which are only lechatchila but not me'akev, like find the Yeriot of the Sefer Torah together and various other things like that. All right, any questions or comments?
Yep.
Very good. So we'll stop here and let Hashem continue next week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Sure.
יישר כוח.